Hello and welcome to this week's video lecture. What I've got on the screen is the Access Chapter 2 guided assignment, download area and submission area. And you get to this from your Blackboard website under this week's assignment. So I just clicked on this and that got us to that other website there. You click on download materials. You'll need to download the instructions, the Access database, and an Excel spreadsheet. We'll be importing data from the Excel spreadsheet. Once you've got all that opened and set up, then you can follow along or just pay attention to what I'm doing and listening to the different pieces of information that I'm talking about in terms of database design and editing. So here we have our actual Access database. It's open. We have a table called donors. If I double click it, I can see the field names in there and I can see the data in there. If I go up here and do a right click on that tab, I can go to design view and I can see how this table was structured. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and right click on this and go to close. And so step 2 says create a new table in design view using the name donations. Add the primary key field as donation ID with the number data type and a field size of long integer. Then add the following field names to the table. All right, so how do we go about creating a new table? So if we click on this tab at the very top, we can see we've got create, and it allows us to create all these different things. We're going to create a table, and we want to be in design view. So we're in design view. I clicked on that. We're going to type in the name of this table is donations. And typically it's not going to let you save a table until you've actually saved it. And so you always want to save it before you get out of it, otherwise you'll lose all your typing and creation. All right, it says add the primary key field as donation ID. Okay, so notice there's a little key here, so it's actually already created a primary key for that. So donation ID. Now you can click here. I'm going to do a right click and you can see it's set for primary key. If I clicked on that, it took the primary key away. You don't need to do that, but in case it's not there, you might click onto the left-hand side of the field name and then you'll get the little key there. So when you click off of that, you'll see it a little brighter. All right, so we've got donation ID as the field name as the primary key. And then under the data type, and we're going to make this long integer. So we're going to make it number. And then under number, you can see down here where it says field size, this is where you would make it long integer. This is very important because when you're linking tables, the data types have to match. Even though the data type here might be number in another table, if it's not long integer that you're trying to connect it up to, you're going to get a type mismatch error. So anytime you get a type mismatch error, look for your data types not being the same that you're trying to connect. All right, so then it says add the following field names to the table in that order. So make sure you spell it correctly. I'm going to pause. All right, as I did that, I just hit tab, tab, tab until it gets to the next line. So in step 3, it says change the data type for donor ID and plant ID fields to number. So we're going to do that. Change the data type for donation date field to a date time. Remember, this is adding some integrity there, and so you're making sure you're getting the right kind of data that's going into these fields. And we want the last one to be currency. All right. So this is creating the structure to hold our data. It always has to be done first before you ever put any data in. Step 4 says view the data table in Datasheet View. So I just did a right click on the tab, go to Datasheet View. You can also get to it from this area right here. We're going to save the table. And now it's saying, okay, we've got donation ID, donor ID, plan ID, and so on across the top. Enter the following records. So I'll show you the first one, and then I'll pause. I'll hit tab, 24, 15. I'm going to enter a date here. And I'll hit tab. As we move off that record, that's what saves the record into the database or into the table. So I'm going to enter the rest of the information, and then when I come back, we'll start on step 5. Okay, I'm back, and I've typed in all the information, so I just want to check my numbers again. I go down the columns here. It's quicker that way. 317, 43, 419, 12, 19, 12, all 2018, 120, 50, 50. Okay, it looks like the data's good. All right, so now it says, step 5, sort the records in the donations table. All right, so we need to get out of this. We're going to hit close, and that'll actually save it. So we're open. I just opened it back up again for you. We see the donations table. Now it says sort the records in the donations table by donation amount. So if I come over here, now I can sort it in descending order. Descending would be largest to smallest. Save and close the table. Save, close. All right. So step 6 now, it says import the downloaded Excel workbook as a new table in your current database. Using the wizard, specify that the first row contains column headings. Set the plant ID field to be indexed with no duplicates. Set the plant ID field as the primary key and import the table with the name plants. Do not save the steps. So what we need to do here is click on this external data tab at the top, and we're going to look for the import and link group. And since we know this is an Excel spreadsheet that we're getting the data from, we're going to click here. Now we could import data from another Access database or even another type of database that might be out there. So we're going to click on Excel because that's what we've got. So that opens up this wizard. So it says specify the source and definition of the object. So I need to go and browse where I save this file. And I've got it listed here. I'll click on it. I'll click open. And it says import the source data in a new table in the current database. That's what we want to do. We don't want to append. Append means it's going to add to the bottom of another table that we have. And we don't want to just link to that data source and be able to query that data source later on. So we're going to actually do this one. We'll click OK. And it shows the worksheet. And it sort of says, okay, this is what I've got laid out. So plant ID, plant name, plants on hand. We're going to click Next. We need to make sure this is checked, that the first row contains column headings. Those are our field names. It's going to say the field option, plant ID, The data type is going to be, if we go back and look and see what it says, we're going to leave this data type alone, but notice here it says it's index and duplicates okay. That's not what we want. If we're going to have plant ID as a primary key, it can never have duplicates, so we don't want to allow that. And this will again enforce the integrity of our database so that doesn't happen. We'll click next, and we'll let access choose the primary key. No, we want to make this plant ID the primary key, so we're going to choose it ourselves. And then we're ready to import the table. And it's asking us, what do you want to call this? And we see that in our directions it should be called plants. So then we'll hit finish. We don't want to save these steps, so we're ready to hit close. Notice it's added plants now, and that is now a table in our database. If I were to go to design view, you can see that that is the primary key and the different types of data types that was created when it imported it. And it tries to choose the best one. You may have to go back and change those later on, but I think for this assignment we'll be okay. We'll go ahead and close this and go back over here to look at step 7. It says view the plants table in design view and change the field size for the plant ID field to long integer. Save the table. Click yes in the dialog box, indicating that some data may be lost. Close the data. So why are we having to change this now? Chances are we're having to change this because when we link up plants to one of these other tables, it's going to have the right data type. And then we'll see how that's done later on. So for now, we're going to get into design view. That's the structure. It wants us to change the field size of plant ID field to long integer. So notice here the field size is set at double. We need to change that to long integer. So it's number, but it's not double. It's going to be long integer. We're ready to save. And this, because we're changing the data type, if the data that's currently in the database doesn't match, it will be deleted. So this is why it's giving you this warning. So do you want to continue anyway? Say yes. Okay. Step 8, we need to close the table. Hold on. Just hit a right click, hit close. Step 8 says begin establishing the relationships in the database by adding donations, donors, and plants tables to the relationship window. So if we go under database tools, we can see we have this under relationships group, we have this relationships here. It opens, I just double clicked, it shows us all the tables. I can click on, I'm just holding down the shift key as I select all 3 of them. You can add them one at a time if you like. It just takes more time. I like to see everything that's in my tables, and I see all my primary keys and how they're arranged. Now, for me, just because I've been using databases for a long time, I like to arrange them in the order in which I think things will be linked. So donors make donations. Those donations are linked to a particular plant. Right. So back to step 8. It says close the show table dialog box after we've done that. Did that. Create a one-to-many relationships between donor ID in the donors table and the donor ID field in the donations table. So I'll just click on donor ID and I'll drag and drop it with my arrow to donor ID in the donations table. When I let go, a dialog box opens up. In that dialog box, it tells me this table here, donors, Donor ID is the field that I want to link to donations in the donor ID field. We want to enforce referential integrity, which again means that I can't have a data in this, I can't add a record in the donations table unless this donor ID exists over here in this table. That's what referential integrity means. And that when I hit create, this database will enforce that and won't allow me to enter records unless that donor ID exists. All right. Select the option to cascade update the related fields. Oh, did I do that? So what I can do is I can click on that link. The link is 1 and the infinity sign represents many. I'm going to right click and I'm going to edit that relationship. And it says select the option to cascade update. So I'm going to do cascade update related fields. Hit OK. What that means is that if I were to go back into this table and change the donor ID, it would go and find all the matching records over here and change those as well, which is a nice feature if you're using it. I don't see it used that often, but it's available if you think you're going to make some changes like that. All right, step 9, create a one-to-many relationship between plant ID and the plants table in the plant ID field in the donations table. Enforce referential integrity, set the option to cascade update the related fields, and then close the relationship window. So again, I'm going to click on plant ID and I want to drag it and let go here. I make sure that my fields are correct that I'm linking on from which table. I'm going to enforce this. I'm going to do the cascade. Notice we're not doing cascade deleted related records. And you have to be very careful if you ever check this box. So this box would say that, oh, if I delete the donor, then go out here and delete all the donations that were ever made by that donor. That's usually not what you want to happen in your database. So be very careful about selecting that cascade delete related records. So I'm going to hit create. Again, one-to-many. So we've got all that set. We're going to hit save. We're going to hit close. So we've closed our relations. Once the relations are created, we are now able to do queries. So that gets us to step 10. Step 10 says create a query using a simple query wizard. So where would we get that? So we go to create, and under queries we have the query wizard. And we can see we've got the simple query wizard here. And so we'll hit OK. And then it says from the donations table, so we need to change that to donations. Add the donor ID and the donations amount. And we're good here. We want to make sure it's a detail query. Okay. And name the query donations over 100. So donations over, make sure you spell it exactly the way they have it, 100. And click finish. Okay. So we've named it donations over 100, but you see we don't have, we have some donations that aren't over 100. And so step 11 says view the query in design view and set the criteria for the donation amount field so that it only donations greater than 100. So I'm going to go to, I just did a right click on the tab. I'm going to go to design view. So this is the query by example panel. So under donations amount, you'll see there's a row that says criteria. So the criteria I'm looking for is just for this field donations amount, and there I will add greater than 100. Sort the query in ascending order by donation amount field, save the query and run it. Okay, so under sort, we're going to put ascending order, right? Sort the query, this is step 12, in ascending order by donation amount field, save the query and run it. So right click here, save it. The run button is right here, which is called execute. And so now we see that just these donors have donations over 100. Then we're going to close that. What's nice about having this query saved is that as you add data to your tables, you can run this query again and it will update for you. Step 13 says create another query in design view. So here's query design. It says add the donations, donors, and plants tables to the query design window. So you can add them one at a time or hold down the shift key and select them all. Click add. And then I'm going to close this. Notice that the relationships that we created earlier are already done for us, and so they're already linked. So before you do any queries, you need to always create your relationships before you do the queries. Otherwise, you won't be linking your tables together and they won't pull the correct information. Key thing. Think about that for a second. These links weren't done already. You wouldn't be able to get what plants this donor was giving money for. Okay. All right, so we've added these to the query design window. We've closed it. Add the donation date field from the donations table. Just click and drop. Okay, or I can just double click up here. The donor's last name and first name. I'm just double clicking that time. And phone field from the donors table in that order. Step 14, add the donation amount. Field from the donations table after the phone field. Then add the plant name from the plants table. So we've linked all this data and we're going to create a view now, or a query. And this view is going to be a new like little table that just has this information in it. So hopefully that'll show you what views are and explain those a little better than what you've gotten out of the lectures thus far. Step 15 says sort the query in descending order by the date of donation. So notice we have sort here, make that descending. Then by last name of the donor in ascending order. So this is a secondary sort, and it always has to go left to right here. So this is the primary sort. So all the same dates, then you would sort by last name within the same date. So that's a secondary sort. We could do a tertiary sort and so on. Okay. Still doing steps 15. Save the query with the name plant pickup list. So I'm going to save. And instead of using the default name, I'm going to call it plant pickup list. And then run the query. So that's what we've got. And then we want to right click and hit close. Step 16 says copy the plant pickup list query and paste it using e-newsletter as the query name. So plant pickup list, I'm going to do a right click on that, hit copy, then I'm going to hit paste, and it's going to ask me to give it a new name. And you would want to do this if you're using similar field names but want to change a couple of things. So it just makes it easier than starting over from scratch. Okay, so now I've got 3 queries sitting in here. It says open this up in Design View and delete the donation date column. So I'm going to click right here, do a right click and hit cut. Add the e-newsletter field to the first column of the design grid and set it to sort in ascending order. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to do this e-newsletter and put it in the first column. So if I drag that and let go there, you see it moved everything to the left. We also want to sort this in ascending order. We didn't change anything else yet. So we need to save this, and then we'll run. Always save first, because if you run it, something could be wrong and it hangs up, and then you've lost all your changes. So I'll run that, and we can see that that has worked for us. And now we're ready to close. And step 18 says close all the database objects. So these are all our objects here. We've got tables and we've got queries. They're all closed and we're ready to submit. So I'll close this and I'll submit it. And that ends this video lecture for the guided assignment for Access.